So how did GitHub work out? What was your process? And can you tell us more about what your internship process was?
Yeah. So for interviewing, I think the most difficult thing about um, trying to get into GitHub was probably just the fact that like so many companies really do rely on referrals and school recruiting. Um, I think I was very like 1 in 100. Like I got an email and it ended up working. Um, so yeah, like I got an email from the recruiter. I remember talking to her. It's very casual at first, and I think it was very much like, "What is your design process? It's like, how did you get into design?" Very similar to like this interview. Um, and after that, I had to do something similar to like a portfolio presentation. Um, Specifically because GitHub is more like focused on coding as a product. And the design systems team is also very much like designer engineer hybrids. I had like a coding interview, but it wasn't necessarily like back end coding. It was more of like, do you know HTML, CSS? Do you know how to do responsive design type stuff? And that was a very interesting interview. I think like very unique from what I know now. And then after that, GitHub was also unique in that I had a lot of different like chats. Like I had a lot of, I think like here's like one meet the team interview. I had a couple, I think, one-on-ones with like my manager who would be my manager for that summer. I even had actually, and I love that they did this. I had a diversity and inclusion interview where we specifically talked about like what kind of things I did outside of school, what kind of things I did within my own community, and how I like grew from my community and impact and gave back to that community. And I'm so happy that they did that because it's a really, really great way to kind of like think like challenge myself to not only like recall what I love doing with my community, but also almost like make a promise to the company that I will keep doing that in a way. So yeah, that's kind of how that interview process went. I usually had debriefs every day that I had an interview. I usually had a debrief with my recruiter at the end of the day.
That's great. So that would have reduced your kind of anxiousness as well, that you had a better idea of, okay,
Yeah,
this is how the interview went, and you don't need to worry about certain things. And there are certain things that you can improve or work on.
of course. Yeah.
That's great,
Yeah.
man. Are there any tasks that you can tell us more about that were given to you during your application process?
Um, I don't know that there's so many tasks as much as like very like standard like portfolio presentations. I feel like they do at every company. Um, I guess I can talk a little bit more about that. Portfolio presentation in general. The first time I applied for any design job, I didn't know that you needed a portfolio, like a slide deck. And a lot of companies I think also advise like candidates like, oh, technically you don't need a slide deck. But I do think like it's really useful because when you're looking at like a website like portfolio, it's really meant for like a recruiter to spend 5 to 7 minutes on it and like move on after that. And so you want to keep it short and concise and give like kind of high level information. But when it comes to portfolio presentation, you have like 30, 45 minutes to go over like 1, 2 projects maybe. And so you can really like go in depth. The audience is completely different, right? Like there's totally different use case of you trying to tell a story about your project rather than just trying to get as much information out the door um, in a concise and like digestible manner. And so that's, I think, the one of like the biggest like tasks that I did have to end up doing for interviewing was just like making a slide deck, making sure it fit my style, making sure it fit like my portfolio. Everything was kind of cohesive brand wise for like me as an like an employee or as a brand of myself, like that kind of stuff. And then also just making sure that I was including the right fidelity and amount of information and covering all my bases.